All right. It's time for BuckeyeGrove Instant Access.
It's about time.
With the latest breaking news, analysis, and much more from around the world of Ohio State. Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com and the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You're so money and you don't even know it.
Let's move quickly and hand it off to our host, Kevin Noon.
It's time to start running!
Hey, welcome to the BIA podcast, BuckeyeGrove Instant Access. I am your host, Kevin Noon. I'll be joined here momentarily with our recruiting analyst, Joseph Hastings. It is a Wednesday morning, and I want to thank everybody for coming along the ride with us and listening to our great show. We are still a couple weeks away from the start of the Big Ten season, but that doesn't mean there's not news going on just because there are no games being played. But, you know, everybody wants to talk about recruiting. That's always a constant, regardless of what's going on 365 days a year. So I figured there was no better time than now to bring in our rising star, Joseph Hastings, to talk a little bit about Ohio State recruiting. Joseph, how are you doing this morning?
Hello, Kevin. I'm doing excellent today. How about yourself?
Oh, hanging in there. Been a hectic day. By the time that we post this podcast, I'll have had a chance to talk to Ohio State defensive line coach Larry Johnson and some of the linemen. A lot of stuff going on, but let's get right to it. And some unwelcome news happened here recently in terms of the recruiting front. Super talented defensive tackle Tywone Malone out of New Jersey released a top 6 without the Buckeyes on the list. It seemed like that could be a possibility as he is a very talented baseball player as well. But, I'll let you kind of get into it. What's your take on the situation?
It's definitely an unfortunate situation for Ryan Day and his staff and Larry Johnson because they were doing an excellent job of recruiting him. Don't get me wrong about that. They were constantly contacting him. They made him a huge priority. They definitely wanted him along the defensive line. And from what I've been hearing, he has absolutely taken another step compared to what he did last year. So his improvement along the defensive line, his versatility, he's actually playing strong side defensive end at Virgin Catholic this year. They really wanted him. The unfortunate thing is he also wants to play baseball. And based off of a recent interview that he did with Ball's Quest, Austin Price, he said that baseball is going to be the deciding factor in his recruitment. And it seems like, based off that conversation, that he wants to play baseball professionally and not football. If this came down primarily to football, I think Ohio State wins it fairly easily. The future cast predictions reflected that because Ohio State was doing a good job recruiting him football-wise. On the baseball front, however, I don't believe he was that much of a priority. I reached out to a baseball source over a couple of weeks ago. I was told that there was nothing to share at the moment about his recruitment and their pursuit of him, and that they would let me know. Nothing ever came about that, so it seems like he was kind of on the back burner or, hadn't been a priority for that staff. So he had made it very clear he wanted to be recruited by a program, both baseball and football-wise. He wanted to be heavily prioritized by both programs. And the 6 programs that made the cut for him obviously did the job, and Ohio State wasn't one of those schools.
Something else I kind of wanted to throw in there, too. The writing is always on the wall in these types of situations. Do you think that Ohio State making the move with Tyleik Williams, and that's not to call Tyleik Williams any sort of a plan B or anything like that, but do you think that maybe that there was some method behind the madness there of them maybe upping the pressure with another interior lineman just because things maybe were not necessarily always matriculating the right way with Malone?
I completely agree with you because a few months ago, Tyleik had released the top 6 that featured Ohio State, and we were looking at it because he did have an offer, but kind of brushed it off a little bit because we knew that Tywone Malone was the top guy for them as defensive tackle. But then all of a sudden, his commitment kind of came out of nowhere. It had been said he committed to Ohio State. And at that time, it kind of became a little bit clear that they were planning for the possibility of Malone not being in this class. And that's not to say that Malone wouldn't have been a take for them because he would have absolutely have been a take even with Williams committing. But They didn't want to be left empty-handed, and Ty Lee commit to a school like Virginia Tech or North Carolina or something like that, and then them be unable to flip him down the line. So they wanted to make sure that they ensured they had a second defensive tackle in this class to go alongside Michael Hall. And just considering the circumstances, you have to say they played their cards right. They read the writing on the wall with Malone, and they were able to get a second DT who's somebody that I think could be a candidate for the Rivals 250.
Let's shift gears here a little bit. We are going to stay on the defensive line, sort of, and look out west to the duo out in the state of Washington with a talented defensive end and a talented wide receiver. You know, what is your take on what is kind of going on there? I know that over at BuckeyeGrove, there was some consternation because national recruiting analyst Mike Farrell came out and installed Oklahoma as maybe the slightest of slight favorites on landing Emeka Egbuka. But, you know, I don't, even when you look at the percentages and the number of schools that still likely are in play, I would say it's by barely any margin at that point. So guys that are a couple thousand miles away, we're in a dead period until the end of the year at least. You know, where do things stand in your opinion on that talented duo, which certainly are not a package by any stretch of the imagination?
Well, with JT Tuimoloau, it's definitely a tough situation to read. It always has been. He's not someone who wants to do interviews that much. Getting in touch with him is nearly impossible as a media member. But he did release the top 7, which I found to be very interesting. He released that top 7 last week. I thought, in my opinion, it would have been closer to a top 4, top 5. I didn't realize that his recruitment was that expansive. In my opinion, there are some filler schools that are out there. I don't think Michigan is in play for him as much as some of the other schools on his list. Also, Oklahoma. Talented defensive players that, especially someone of his caliber. When they have options like Ohio State and Alabama on the table, it's just tough for me to imagine him choosing Oklahoma over those schools with those rich traditions along the defensive line. But him, releasing that top 7 was interesting, considering the fact that as of right now, he cannot take any official visits through the end of the year. He has to take all of his visits on his own. And then, it'd be tough for me to see him taking 7 visits, especially the schools that are in different states, each of them being in different states, for him to take 7 visits over the course of these next 3 months. So with his recruitment right now, obviously I'll give Ohio State the very slightest edge right now over Alabama, but I do believe the Buckeyes lead for him. As for Emeka Egbuka, I did see that future cap prediction in as well from Farrell that Oklahoma, probably the school out on top for him. With Egbuka, he's another one who doesn't like to talk with the media, who really isn't open about everything, but I still like where Ohio State stands with him. They got 2 visits from him last year, and I think if he attends that Buckeye Bash on October 24th, that could kind of seal the deal with him. What was really telling for me is that he had the Sooner Summit, which was a few weeks ago, and I was told that he was supposed to attend it, but he ended up not attending it. That was a big non-visit, in my opinion, for him not to be at that event, which featured a lot of big targets. So, in my opinion, I think Ohio State leads for both of them. I'm not saying, like you said, that they're a package deal by any means, but as of right now, I'd probably give Ohio State the edge.
So certainly, a couple of big names still on Ohio State's board. We're to the point now, Ohio State's sitting at 20 kids in this class right now. Could get to 25. It could be 23. Cap management is going to be crazy to figure out. I mean, Ryan Day said in a recent interview that even with this year not counting, and probably there being some relief out there toward 85 because of having this as kind of a lost year in terms of counting against eligibility, that he didn't think that they would venture far away. I mean, he didn't say they would get over 85, to be honest, but we'll see. But the point being, we don't know exactly how many guys are in this class. Are there any other names that you're really kind of keeping an eye on in 21? Because often, we got to the point under Urban Meyer of saying, oh, that guy's an Urban Meyer special who came on late. there's no way to be sneaking guys on campus for that official visit or anything else. I mean, I just, I guess I even myself, as somebody who follows this closely, I'm still trying to figure out what's still left on the board.
Yeah, it's very difficult because, especially considering Tywone Malone not being, available for Ohio State at this particular time. We were kind of penciling him in at one point as someone who would be in this class. Now you have that third defensive tackle spot that, they may decide to fill, they may not decide to fill. If they do, they could push for a guy like Damon Payne, who's committed to Alabama. Marcus Bradley, they had a little bit of some momentum with him earlier this year. He's committed to Maryland. So they could try and push for a couple of flips there and try and add a third defensive tackle. I'm going to say it, because he's still being recruited according to Mike Farrell, to Mite Adelaide, former Ohio State commit. I know Texas, Florida, Alabama, those are the schools that I would definitely put in front of Ohio State at this time, but you have to mention him because he's still being recruited by the program. Tristan Lee, I know they just added Zenue Machowski, who's a talented player, underrated player from Indiana, but Tristan Lee is a 5-star offensive tackle. If he wants in this class, he's definitely guaranteed a spot. And I was told by his mother about a week ago that he may be in attendance for the Buckeye Bash on October 24th. That would definitely be a huge visit, considering the fact that LSU, didn't start the season off well with the loss to Mississippi State. Oklahoma's kind of gaining some momentum in his recruitment, but maybe Ohio State can kind of take over with a really good season. So he's someone to pay attention to. Derek Davis, the safety out of Pennsylvania. I spoke with his dad a few weeks ago. Derek actually has family from Ohio, and his dad is from Ohio too. So there's some connections there. His dad told me that they visited Ohio State as much as Penn State. So Penn State is seen as the leader in the future cast, but you never know. Maybe the Buckeyes can pull off another steal out of Pennsylvania there. So there's definitely some spots that they can fill out. Maybe they offer a guy late. We saw a couple of late offers with Machowski, Florida commit Justice Boone over the past several weeks. So they could do a late offer, or they can try and flip some guys like I mentioned before. But at this point, I'm seeing probably 24 commits in this class, 23, 24 commits based on how everything's going.
And, with 23 or 24 commits, and Ohio State and Alabama are sitting right there neck and neck, and, are both at or beyond the 20 commit limit in terms of what counts towards your recruiting class, meaning higher guys come in, it drops lower guys off the rankings. We still probably have several more rankings updates between now and the final rankings. I'm going to put it to you. I know you've talked about in your excellent 3-2-1 series before. Can Ohio State land that number one class? Can Ohio State break the grip that the Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, USCs of the world have had during the Rivals.com era, going back through the class of 2002? Can Ohio State become the first truly northern team to own the recruiting national title?
Absolutely. In my opinion, they will. I would have felt a lot more confident about it if Malone had included Ohio State in his top 6, and if he was strongly considering them from the baseball and football perspective. But, with JC Tuimoloau, Emeka Egbuka both being favorited to go to Ohio State, if they can even land one of those, based off how the rankings are right now, they would easily leapfrog Alabama. They're only 14 points behind them right now. So let's say Emeka Egbuka commits today, they add roughly 100 or so points, and then they're both at 21 commits between Alabama and Ohio State. They both have 21 commits in that scenario. So Alabama is only ahead because they have one more commit at this juncture. I believe Ohio State's in the best position. They have the highest average star rating. The average star rating of their commits is 3.85. It's 3.81 for Alabama. Now, like you mentioned, though, there's some other factors. There's the rankings changes. We saw Alabama usurp Ohio State in the last ranking update without adding any commits, just because their commits received some huge bumps. Maybe Ohio State can, like Marvin Harrison or Reed Carrico, maybe they can get some big bumps and push themselves over over Alabama. And then also you have to factor in maybe Alabama gets more commitments than Ohio State. We just talked about Ohio State probably not having too many guys on the board. Maybe Alabama gets to 25, 26, and it's a numbers game, and that's why they get more points than Ohio State. But based on how everything's going, where Ohio State stands with Buka and Tywone Malone, I'm going to give them the edge right now and say that they come out on top in this cycle.
Well, I think we've wrapped up 21 at this point. A lot of questions and not a lot of answers at this point, but Joseph certainly has taken some swings at it. We're going to turn our attention to the class of 2022 here in a minute, but first let's hear from one of our fantastic sponsors.
Hague Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HagueH2O.com.
Welcome back to the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon. I'm joined by Joseph Hastings, and we are talking Ohio State recruiting. Let's turn our attention to the class of 2022. Ohio State has the number one class, but oh my God, it's so early at this point. So, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, but 6 commits in that class. They've got a good mixture of in-state guys and out-of-state guys, 4 from the state of Ohio, 2 from out of state. It's all started with C.J. Hicks, the tremendous linebacker out of Kettering. What are your impressions so far of the start that they've gotten in that class of 2022? The base that they have, and just really a class that seems to already have a dynamic recruiter in it in terms of C.J. Hicks, who certainly has not been timid on social media.
Well, Kevin, you mentioned it perfectly with C.J. Hicks being a great leader on the recruiting trail. Honestly, even if they had just one commit in this class and it was C.J. Hicks, I would feel really good about where things are. He is so active on the recruiting trail. He speaks to a lot of players, and that isn't just him telling me this. I speak to 2022 recruits who tell me that C.J. is constantly in his ear. Even guys who don't have offers, he's speaking with them. He's in touch with them. So even if they just had one commit and it was Hicks, I feel really good about where things are with Ohio State. Him being an in-state guy, he really wants to prioritize the Ohio-based people, but he's also not afraid to dip into North Carolina, to dip into Kansas for Desan Makulo. He's really active. He's all around the country. But in terms of this class itself, you really have to like where things stand. They're building potentially the best linebacking corps that we've seen, at least in terms of ranking wise, that we've seen in Rivals.com history. With McCullough, with Hicks, with Gabe Powers, all of them being top 25 overall prospects in the nation for the 2022 cycle. You really have to like where things are with their linebacker group. And also they're still recruiting other guys like Sean Murphy, a 5-star. They're also recruiting Jalen Walker, who's a top 100 player. So they're looking at a 4th linebacker, and all 4 being in the top 100. If that was to be the case, if Murphy or Walker commits, that would be excellent. You have Bennett Christian, who's more of a blocking tight end, but he can make some plays in the passing game as well. So, and they're looking to add a receiving tight end like Donovan Green out of Texas or Benji Gosnell. Those 2 would be excellent additions. And then also you have Tegra Teshabola and Jair Brown. Both of them play for Lakota West. Those are 2 really good prospects, both Rivals 250 prospects. And the big thing for me, the way I would just summarize this class in general, they're locking down the state of Ohio. We've seen Ohio State dip into Pennsylvania and take some recruits from them in this cycle. You've seen Michigan lose prospects, top prospects to other schools in this cycle. Ohio State is not letting that happen. They didn't let it happen in the 2021 class. They're not letting it happen in 2022. So that's definitely the biggest takeaway for me. Hicks being there, and then also them just locking down the state of Ohio.
And, it's talking about locking down the state of Ohio. Recently, about 6 days ago, you put in a future cast for offensive tackle Blake Miller. Talk about, why you think that one's going to be a good connection. And obviously I feel like it too, because I have a future cast into Ohio State as well.
Yes, well, I mean, Michigan is one of the schools that he's considering. He told me that he has a kind of unofficial top four of Michigan, Clemson, Florida, and Ohio State. If it's a Michigan-Ohio State battle, I'm taking Ohio State, especially if it's an in-state prospect for the Buckeyes. Then with Clemson's always interesting, especially with offensive linemen. But, I view it's the same situation with Florida. I just view Ohio State as being able to keep him in the state. After speaking with him, I put in the future cast after speaking with him, and the conversation was just all glowing about Ohio State, how much of a priority he is for the program, how well he's being pursued by Greg Sudderwall, assistant offensive line coach Kennedy Cook. The coaching staff is putting a real big emphasis on him. And with him not being able to take any visits over these next several months, maybe Ohio State can kind of put the pressure on him and, he ends up committing to the Buckeyes. But either way, I believe he does end up with Ohio State when it's all said and done.
Yeah, you talk about Coach Studrawa, and, there certainly has been a little bit of a polarizing situation there in terms of how fans feel about the recruiting, that he's done. He certainly has landed some guys, but, I think there was some criticism a couple years ago when they weren't able to hold on to Jackson Carman, but being able to go out and get Blake Miller would be a huge get for them to put into this class and have him, adjacent to Tegra Shabola as well. I want to talk about one last position group in terms of how recruiting is, and then we'll call it a show, and that's running back in 2022. Obviously Ohio State in 2021 has, they have Trevion Henderson and they have Evan Pryor. They're sitting with a real nice class. I think 2022 shapes up, and they're in on a lot of top names as well. You've had a chance to talk to a couple of them, within the last couple of weeks. Where do you see things?
Now, it's very interesting because with them taking Trevion Henderson and Evan Pryor, I thought maybe they'd go for one running back in the 2022 cycle. That's not going to happen based off the way that they're recruiting at the position. Damari Alston out of Georgia says that they're heavily pursuing him, and you can tell because not only the contact he has with the staff, they send a lot of recruiting edits to him. Nicholas Singleton out of Pennsylvania told me that Ohio State and Penn State both lead for him at the moment, and he actually told me that he's supposed to be visiting Ohio State this weekend. That's something to pay attention to. Deland Hayden out of Tennessee, he's another person who feels like a priority from the staff. One of his quotes to me was actually, "I'm really starting to fall in love with them." So he's somebody who's really feeling the love from the program. Jadarian Price has Ohio State in his top three right now. He's out of Texas. Florida-based running back Terrence Gibbs says Ohio State is one of three main schools for him right now in his recruitment that is sticking out to him. And you have some other guys like Gavin Sawchuk and Kayshawn Allen, who's from IMG Academy, who are really high on Ohio State as well. So based on how everything's going, it wouldn't even be a surprise if, 3-4 running backs want into this class. I think it's more realistic that they take two, possibly extend that to three. But the way that they're recruiting the position, it definitely seems like they want multiple running backs in this class, and they're in a really good position with several of them, specifically Nicholas Singleton, Damari Alston as well. So I think Ohio State, Tony Alford, you have to give a lot of credit to him. He's been the one name consistently mentioned amongst each of these guys. He's really putting in a lot of effort and a lot of work with them. So Ohio State fans definitely have to like where things stand with the running back recruiting in 2022.
That's all sorts of good stuff there from Joseph Hastings in terms of how Ohio State's recruiting classes are shaping up. You can always read all of his great stuff. He does his Thursday 3-2-1 in terms of recruiting, and then he and Andy Andrews they share the duties on the Skull Session, which runs Sunday nights, generally around 8 p.m. Eastern, as close as we can get it to there. Always a little breaking news may push it up or push it back, but I want to thank Joseph for being part of the show this afternoon. And I want to thank you for listening to the show. This is episode 51 of the BIA podcast, and I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I want to thank everybody for listening, and we will talk to you very soon.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game, exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcasts Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to click on that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing, and come visit us over at BuckeyeGrove.com for all the best Ohio State information on the web.